But at the end of the day, it's important to realize our potential careers are always shaped by us in the end. Remember what I said before. We can be adaptable. We could change our minds and have personal growth where things we're interested in now may not be the case a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. That's perfectly fine. That's okay. Everything is under our control. We shape what our future can be. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. Your interests and your smarts can lead to a post-secondary pathway you can follow. And it is one that also can change. Maybe you think like, oh, I'm really interested in sports. I'm really interested in football. I want to be on the New York Giants or something like that. I want to go and be in a AA or AAA school, All-American quarterback. I'm really good at throwing the ball, really good at action smarts. Maybe that will happen. But there are other ways you can put that interest to good use. If you're not on the field, you can be working behind the scenes as a coach. You could be working in the locker room as a sports medicine expert, taking care of players because of their injuries. You could be working outside of the entire realm as a journalist covering sports on ESPN. You're still tied to your interest, but in different ways. Those are just some of the possible options, and they are still directly feeding into what your interests and what your smarts may be. And if your interest in sports changes, that's perfectly fine. Maybe you focus more on the science aspect of it. Or maybe you're focusing on a different career altogether. The point is, knowing yourself is the key to this. You know yourselves better than anybody else. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being unsure about yourself sometimes. Nothing wrong with that at all. But knowing yourself and how all of these different parts fit together is the key to unlocking our potential, to allowing us to choose a path for what life after high school can be. How do you, quote, know thyself? Who's ever heard of that meme before? Know thyself. There's a lot of different ways that we can go about this. Guidance and support, setting goals for ourselves, general knowledge of what we need to do, as well as self-reflection, being honest with ourselves, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are. When we start thinking about ourselves a little bit, tying and locking into our interests and what our smarts are can make the pathway open and quite easy to follow for life after high school. For those of you at home, if you also have any questions, as Liz said before, first off, you will be provided this video and the PowerPoints, but definitely I would say write down your questions and get back to us. You can, again, contact us during the club hours quite easily and ask us any questions or clarifying statements about any of this, and we can go through it again. Pathways to a career. A lot of us have probably daydreamed about what our future might be, what our future career might be. When I was in high school, I wanted to be two things specifically. I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to be a lawyer. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm here instead. Well, things changed. What interest do I have? I have an interest in talking with people. I have an interest in learning. I have an interest in drawing and writing. What skills do I need to achieve all of this? Well, for those jobs, I needed to go to school for a long time. I needed to learn how to decipher different legalese, which is a fancy word for saying like what lawyers learn. All those fancy three-letter words and all, three-syllable words you probably hear. I would have to learn how to paint or draw because unfortunately, I learned very quickly that my artistic ability is at best just making stick figures. So being an artist was kind of out of the question. But then I discovered while I was in the tail end of high school and the beginning of college that, you know what? I really like teaching too. I like tutoring students. I liked helping them out with their needs. And I wanted to pursue that. What skills do I need for that? Well, I needed to learn how to talk to people, learn how to take a bunch of information and try and make it easy to understand, easy to relate. I had to figure out what type of education I needed to get so I can become a teacher as time went on. whether it was a college degree, that would be what it was for me. Got my college degree as an educator. For others, it could be something different, whether it's an apprenticeship, whether it's for high school or CTE diplomas. And then finally, I had to think about what about my personal and professional growth. How can I become a better teacher? How can I become better at my job, better at my career? And why was that important to become better at it? When we're thinking about our career, it's really easy to imagine us being anything. But there are a lot of different steps that we need to take before we really feel comfortable in that role. I didn't start out wanting to become a teacher, as I mentioned, but I became comfortable with that when I realized I enjoyed it. It's a perfect example of showing you how interests can change. And the skills to become that teacher were skills that I was already developing, and now I just had new things to refine with that. I knew where I needed to get my education to become that teacher. And then I knew I had to continue growing as a person and to continue growing professionally to be a very good teacher. Once you get your dream job, that's not the end of the job. That's not the end of your personal growth. It's always important to realize that we still learn every day, sometimes on the job. So keep that in mind as well. For your pathway, for whatever career you want to do, what interests do you have? We've already talked about that. That's always personal. What skills do you need? Maybe they're tied to your interests. Maybe they're skills you want to build up. What type of education do you need? And what about your own personal and professional growth? Keep those ideas in mind. And there's a lot of ways that you can get help with those. For example, help from others is always a good place to start. There's a lot of different choices for that. Guidance counselors are probably the most important one there. How many of you see your guidance counselor about life after high school now? It's actually an interesting, question if you think about it. If you're a junior or senior listening to this, I'm sure you probably have gone to see the guidance counselor several times. But if you're a sophomore or freshman, maybe it's never crossed your mind. Maybe you're worrying about something else, like my best friend's not talking to me anymore, or I'm trying to go on a date with somebody. There's nothing wrong with that. You should see your guidance counselor for those things. But you should also maybe pop in and say, I was thinking about going into a vocational school, or I was thinking about what colleges I can apply for. Can you help me with that? You can start that right now as a freshman. Build up a relationship with your guidance counselors. They can help you point the way and get you prepared for it now. They're not the only ones. If you feel more comfortable talking to a coach on a sports team or a dance team or gymnastics team or whatever, they can provide guidance as well. Maybe you have questions about how can I be ready for a school tryout for college or something like that. Or how can I prepare myself for the workforce after school? How can I become a coach? It could be as simple as that. Coaches are sometimes the unsung heroes when it comes to advice. Just like guidance counselors, don't be afraid to tap into those resources. I hope you're noticing a theme here because we're going into pretty much everybody who actually works at McCown High School right now. And not just them, it's other mentors too. Your teachers, your mentors, ourselves as College Access for All, use us as support as well. Ask us questions. Ask your teachers questions. If you feel uncomfortable asking teachers or us, and if you have a mentor instead, maybe you're working with a community service project, you have a mentor there, maybe you're working with a boss in an internship already. Don't be afraid to ask them. Everybody has gone through this process before, and they could have good advice on how they can help you make it easier for yourselves. Not just what you need to do to achieve your desired career, but also how to do it. Maybe there's an application process you need to start. Or maybe you need to visit a certain school or a certain job to see if you can even are interested in it or qualified for it. Maybe you need to build that resume out first. These are all just examples of the people who can help you with that. And when all else fails, you can go with your family too. Your parents, siblings, older siblings especially, who have gone through this before. Don't mind the fact that the little image there had its head cut off. Unfortunately, it's the way it was. But Talking to your family is very important sometimes. They can give you good advice, they can give you encouragement, and everybody on here can not just give you guidance, but also can support you too, keep you on top of things. Maybe your mom or dad can say, hey, did you send in your application yet? You know, it's due in like 3 days. Or how's the resume coming? Maybe they can say, well, the resume looks good, but maybe you should add this to it. Or what about this? All of these different groups of people, whether it's your guidance counselors, teachers, your family, your coaches, all of them can give you help. It is okay to ask for help. Never be afraid of that. Never be embarrassed by that. Sometimes people are. I can tell you that from experience. When I was younger, I was always afraid to ask for help. I thought it made me look silly. That's not the case. Sometimes help is the best medicine we have. Guidance and support is the little extra push we need to stay motivated, to be on the right track, to make sure that we are getting ready for what our life after high school will be like. All of the things on the bottom here are just examples of what they can do. Give you information, provide support, deadlines and tasks. Keep that in mind as always. Nothing is ever easy. You can't just say one day, well, I'm going to go to this college. How do you actually get to that college? Well, you have a deadline to submit an application to that college. You should probably gather up information on choosing why you want to go there. Probably ask other people, hey, is that college a good place to go? Is that college good for what I want to do for my career? If you've decided what your career is already. And this can go for anything. I want to learn how to build stuff. Well, what technical school, what vocational school should I go to? I want to try and get good employment after high school. How can I apply for an internship? What job do you want to try and go for after high school in that case? You know, those are different questions to consider. Having guidance and support is the good place to start, but it's not the only thing you can do. We also need to think about our goals. This is probably the hardest part to think about too. What are goals? Well, the short version is as you see here on the screen, an idea of the future or a desired result that you can envision for yourselves. Something that you can plan, something that you can attempt to achieve. We set goals for different reasons. We set goals to find directions for ourselves, find a direction on what we want to do in life. We set goals because it helps us to stay focused and motivated on the tasks at hand. We set goals to learn something new. We set goals because it allows us to get a clearer picture of where we do want to go. Maybe we're setting goals to try and figure out what we want to do for our future. We also set goals for fun. Not everything has to be serious sometimes. And with that, I actually want to ask you a couple of quick questions. They are a series of yes or no questions about our own goal-setting habits. It's a personal pop quiz, if you will. Now, there are no right or wrong answers with this. And we do actually have a Zoom poll that I'm hoping is being set up right now for those that are actually here today. But for those that are listening on the recording right now, I'll actually show you what the questions look like. I'll just read these out real quick to you. So it's a simple yes or no. Do you ever write lists of things you want to do or remember? Do you find yourself working harder when doing or learning something that matches your interests? Would you rather know exactly what you're doing instead of just winging it? Do you feel less stressed when you have a plan for exactly what you should be doing? Have you ever set a goal to achieve either a list of exactly what you should be doing? And finally, have you ever done something that you felt was frustrating, but you finished or accomplished it anyway instead of quitting? Most of the chat poll results, we have a lot of yeses, with the exception of question 4, which had more no's than yeses. And to those that are actually in the chat right now, thank you so much for participating. I do appreciate it. Are you a goal setter? It depends, really. The more yeses you put, yeah, you might already have a good understanding or a natural understanding of why we set goals. You're already goal setting, whether you think about it or not. Organized. You're thinking about planning ahead. If you answered no, you probably have not spent so much time thinking about setting goals. That's actually okay. Sometimes we don't really think about it consciously. Maybe we do like winging it. Maybe we are more impulsive. But it is a powerful thing when we learn how goals can help and improve ourselves, especially when we are really thinking about what our plans will be for life after high school. So, the hope is to start thinking about how we can set goals for ourselves more, whether we do it already or not, and how we can set them clearly. Because sometimes we think we set good goals, but maybe they need a little work. That's okay. First thing we got to talk about is the different types of goals that there are. And they can be broken down into three categories: short term, medium term, and long term goals. And they, yes, are exactly as they sound. Short term goals: things you want to do today, tomorrow, next few weeks or months. Maybe tomorrow, if it's good weather, you go for a walk. Maybe you have a test coming up that you got to study for. So you want to do good on that test. So you got to study for that. Maybe your plan is to go to the gym for like 3 times this week. Those are examples of what short term goals could be. Medium term goals are more tricky. They're the ones that you can do in the next few months or within the next year. There's a good time slot for that. What are your plans for next semester for McCown? When you go into the next grade or when you graduate? What are you hoping to do over the summer after school is done? Those are just some examples. Long-term goals are the big ones. They're the ones you want to do, whether it's next year, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. Long-term goals are probably the most complex, are the ones that we tend to focus on the most when we talk about things like life after high school, like college access. You know, that is like, what kind of job do we want? What kind of career do we want? How do we get to that career? What school do we want to go to? And so on and so on. It could also be other things as well. What are the next 3 years going to look like for me in McCown? If you're a freshman, for example, that's a long-term goal. Like, do you want to become the school valedictorian if they have one? Do you want to have the highest grades in the class? That could be a long-term goal. These are different things that we can think about. And knowing the types of goals is step one, really, in figuring out how we can start accomplishing our goals, how we can start refining them and pursuing these goals. And yes, thinking about these goals is a key component in thinking about our life after high school. Everything that we've talked about previously regarding smarts, interests, careers, this is directly tied to that as well. So if your goal is to go to college and to go into a career of, let's say, education, well, how does that tie into what you're doing now? And is what you're doing now, can that help you achieve your goal? In many cases, it might be a yes already. In other cases, it may be it may take a second to think about, well, what am I not doing that can actually fit this still? How do you achieve your goals? There's two ways that we can talk about right now, and then there is making them smarter. First, setting goals is a way that can motivate you to write them down, make them feel tangible. Some of you have already said yes to that, I'm sure. But setting goals like that is a good way to start. You can start planning the steps to realize your goal. Cross them off. Cross off each one as you work through them. That's really simple, really basic. If your plan is in the next week for a short-term goal is to get a 90 on a test or something like that. Maybe your plan is to study 2 hours a night before you go to bed. Maybe the day of the test, your plan is to do a last-minute study session right before the test begins. Maybe you will have a friend or a teacher or your mom or dad or anybody helping you with that task. And you got to ask them. So you got to think about how you can ask them to help you. That's all the planning. That's organizing your thoughts. That's writing. You can write all those down, do each of them one at a time. Boom, you can achieve your goal then of getting that 90 on that test. But we should also consider how we can make our goals smarter. SMARTER is an acronym. It stands for the different words you see there: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, emotional, and relevant. What does that mean? Well, whenever we start thinking about a goal, we need to go deeper than just saying, well, we should do this. If we have a goal of getting a 90 in that test, we should probably be specific. How are we going to get a 90 on that test, for example? Is that something that is measurable? Is that something that we can do in the time period that we have to achieve that 90? Can in 5 days we study up long enough to make sure we can get a 90 on that test? Is it attainable and realistic? Is it something that we can actually do in that time period? Is it something that's realistic for us? Maybe we have a 70 average in that class. Maybe it's not our strongest subject. Is it realistic for us to hit that 90? Is it something that we can do within the time that we have? Like I said, that 5 days. Notice how some of these different parts of Smarter do mesh together. This allows us to think about these goals in a more logical way, yes, but also in a way that helps us in visualizing what the goal can be, helps us plan accordingly so we can achieve it. The last two are probably the most interesting. Emotional refers to our attachment to that goal. For many of us, a lot of the goals that we do set for ourselves, we are attached to. But maybe sometimes we are trying to do a goal where we're not attached to it. We may not do we actually have an emotional stake in that goal? And lastly, we have, is the goal relevant to us? Are we doing things that are relevant to achieving that goal? Are we actually studying for the right exam? Are we studying properly, for example? Sometimes it could be smaller goals also that are relevant to the larger goals, especially if we're trying to think of long-term goals. If your long-term goal is to become a doctor, for example, well, you got to go to school for that. And you need to have really good grades in certain subjects. So are you actually studying for those subjects? Are you studying math and science and biology? Are you looking into different schools that have doctor programs, that have that are offering that as a career path? How realistic is it that you'll get into those schools? How specific do you want to be? Like, what type of doctor? Are you looking just to be a pediatrician, or maybe a foot doctor or a surgeon? How long do you have to think about this? Are you starting just like a couple of months before you graduate college, or high school as a senior, right before you go into college? Or are you thinking about this as a sophomore? How invested are you in that goal? As you can see, whether it's a short-term or a long-term goal, in those examples, making our goals smarter really helps us think about how likely we can actually obtain that goal. It's also important to keep in mind that being aware of everything and having the correct knowledge base for what we're doing helps us understand how we can achieve these goals too. On the right, you see this little graphic. It's showcasing multiple entry points, different ways that we can enter things like the workforce, different career paths that we can go into. It's also showcasing in the larger arrow there, that big gray arrow, skills, competencies, credentials, anything that we pick up along the way, whether it's education or training, support services, new knowledge on how and where to go. If we are joining an apprenticeship so we can become a carpenter, if we're trying to become a licensed carpenter, if we are looking to become that doctor, what type of schools do we need to go into? What type of degree do we need? If we want to join the workforce right out of the gate, who do we talk to for that? What type of training do we need? What support services can we rely on? How can we increase our skills during all this time, through like internships or apprenticeships, through training, through schooling? Knowledge is power. Knowledge is the awareness or understanding of something or someone, and how and where we fit on the path of what we want to achieve is an important thing to know. We can set this up with our goals quite easily. If we want to become a doctor, we need to probably get a 4-year degree. We need to probably get a lot of training, get certain credentials, get support from other doctors, other peers, teachers, mentors. We need to probably work in a hospital or work in our own clinic to get a license. That could be our career path to becoming a doctor. Totally different from someone who maybe wants to become a carpenter. Maybe they have to go into vocational school, learn all the intricacies of how to build stuff and how to measure it out properly. Maybe they have to take an apprenticeship with a skilled carpenter who will teach them further different ways to build items. Maybe they're building a house or a table or whatever it might be. Maybe they get their certificate. And at the same time, maybe they're getting like a 2-year degree at a community college, just so they have something else to do, something to fall back on. So now you have your license, now you have a degree. That leads to your pathway on becoming a full-fledged carpenter and working for yourself. The only way to get to these different places is knowing the way to go, what skills to increase, what training to get, what support you can have for yourself, and how you can enter and exit out of all of this into a career path that you want, that you may enjoy. This is goal setting 101 in a nutshell. Knowing all these different things is part of your knowledge base at the end of the day. The last part is probably the most important part as well in its own way, and that's self-reflection. Remember, the whole theme of this is knowing yourself, and self-reflection can help you process your thoughts and feelings to make it easier to navigate pretty much everything that is thrown at you. Your successes, your failures, how you can improve everything. How can you make your success possible and achievable? Think about it for a second. What do you want to be successful at? That should be the first part of that question. I want to get good grades so I can go to college. I want to learn how to build stuff. I want to go into the workforce. I want to become this job. Do you actually have goals that are already set up that can achieve those? Maybe, maybe not. But setting up those goals, knowing where you want to go, knowing the pathway you want to take, that's step one to making success possible and achievable. As you can see here, those are the questions that you should be asking yourselves. What are your goals for leading you into your success? How can you achieve these goals? And sometimes this gets overlooked, but it's also just as important. How can we confront any negative things that happen? What if we, for whatever reason, cannot reach our goals? That can happen. That will happen. You should be ready for that. How do you respond to that? That's the power of what a self-reflection can do. It is readjusting yourself for the highs and the lows, for achievements and success, and for confronting negatives or failure. Both can occur. Both will occur throughout your lives. It's important to recognize that now. But setting yourselves up can make the chances of success easier, can make it more likely. That's why you should start setting goals for yourself now. That's why you should ask for help. That's why you should seek support and guidance. That's why you should build up your knowledge base on what you want to do. This will allow you to help achieve your goals. Remember, I said at the top, knowing yourself. I also said that you are in charge of everything. You control what your future lies, what your future can hold. This is part of that. You can start the process now, whether you're in 9th grade or whether you're in 12th grade. But you can make your success possible if you start thinking about how you can obtain it. Getting the support you need from your social networks, from your family, from your teachers, from your guidance counselors, from the college access staff. You can even throw in your friends too. Maybe they're supporting you on what you're trying to do too. All of these, self-reflection, guidance and support, knowledge, and setting goals for yourselves. That's how you can know who you are and help you in thinking about what is the best path going forward. What is the best way to achieve your post-secondary pathway, your life after high school? And then with that and your knowledge of what you're interested in, what your smarts may be, you now have maybe a clearer picture of where you do want to go or how you can achieve it. At the end of the day, though, be you. Remember what your possibilities are. We are all unique, and not everyone grows at the same time or at the same way or at the same pace. Celebrate your successes. Forgive yourself for any mistakes that are made. Don't even bother comparing yourself with others. That'll just drive you crazy. Sometimes it might be therapeutic to think about what you've accomplished so far, small and big. Maybe you didn't hit that 90 average for school this semester, but you got an 80 or an 85, and that was an improvement over what you had last semester, let's say. Maybe you didn't get into your first choice for college, but you got into your second choice and your third, and they provide more options for yourself. Successes, big and small, whether you actually achieve the full extent of what your goals are or not, are very important. Celebrate that. Everybody, again, is unique. Not everyone will be growing at the same time. It's okay to forgive yourself for any mistakes that occur. But it's also important to learn from them too. That's how you can really go up the ladder and achieve what you really want.